Welcome into a new edition of Going Deep Buffalo on the Built-in Buffalo podcast network. Kevin Massare here with Kevin Siracuse. Talk Bills football. It's Bills training camp day one. The Bills came out prepared and were ready to go at St. John Fisher College in Rochester. So that was a pretty exciting day, and we got some news, some notes, some thoughts, and then lastly, what to look forward to as training camp approaches. First and foremost, the show is brought to you by the Summit Center, that's some of the best autism care in Western New York.
Larson-Timko Funeral Home in Fredonia. Larson-Timko Funeral Home offering 100% fully guaranteed price and pre-arranged funeral plans with live streaming available. You can give them a call at 716-679-9000 or visit their website at larsontimkofuneralhome.com.
That's awesome. Well, football is back. It is back, and it is back. And first and foremost, Kevin, want to get your opinion on no players on PUP, no hurt. Everybody played to some extent. That's one of the first times I've ever seen that happen. Every team usually has a couple guys on PUP. The Bills made a concerted effort to come out of the gate healthy, build their roster with youth, with health, speed, and a couple of the other factors. So that's encouraging. I figured we'd get a couple of shocking hurt players, didn't you?
Yeah, especially considering that Matt Milano was a full participant, and they said that they intend for him to be a full participant throughout the summer. Now, obviously, they're probably going to want to limit him. They don't want to rush him back too much. He's not going to be playing every snap during the preseason and things like that. But considering where they were at a few weeks ago, because during mandatory minicamp, didn't they have about 4 or 5 guys, veterans, who were a little bit dinged up between Mike Edwards had that shoulder injury. Was Daquan dealing with something? I know Matt Milano was. Terrell Bernard obviously coming off
Mike
that injury.
Edwards, all their safeties.
Yeah,
like everybody was hurt in minicamp, but that's, it's not a huge deal, but it looked like to be all minor.
Yeah, so I mean that's great news, and who knows? This is a youth movement that we've been waiting for, and maybe it'll pay off because the last couple of years that the Bills have been dealing with a lot of injuries. So that was one of the reasons why they wanted to get younger, because it wasn't working with that old core. So you inject some youth, and who knows? Hopefully they can stay healthy throughout the summer and into the season.
Yeah, one of the best things I heard from the press conference today was Josh Allen's you can say that he finds a player every year to point out to, but Mack Hollins, his love for high pointing Mack Hollins. And, I think we kind of heard the same thing with Trent Sherfield for different reasons last year about his ability to come down with the ball. Totally different players, but still the same type of love from Josh Allen. So I don't know how much we can take away from it, but just the amount that he liked Mack Hollins was originally something that jumped out to me. The ability for these guys to come down with the ball seems like the Bills also made an effort to get players who catch the ball. Quite frankly, they were sick of drops. They're sick of not getting help for Josh Allen. And also McDermott said he feels like the number one receiver role is going to be spread out between the entirety of the unit. So he doesn't necessarily need a number one guy out there that everyone's going to step up when the time comes. And the Bills decided to put as many people on the practice field as possible. What are some of your reactions to the love for Mack Hollins? That was kind of shocking to me. I didn't expect to hear that, as well as the competition level at the receiver position seemed to be full strength.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked when I heard Josh talk about Mack Hollins, because not that Mack Hollins isn't worthy of it, but you're thinking about the receiver room, and you would think about Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. And for him to give that kind of love to Mack Hollins, I think that kind of speaks volumes, because, we've gone throughout the summer trying to project the 53-man roster, and we said that Mack Hollins is pretty close to a lock based on his contract and how we think the Bills are going to use him. And when we had former Bill Stevie Johnson on a few weeks ago, actually it was more than a month ago now, but he said that he loves Mack Hollins too. So Mack Hollins is getting a lot of love. And the thing that kind of stood out with me the most was that Josh said that Mack is himself. He doesn't try to put on a front or a different face and try to be someone who he's not. That's why you see him walking around barefoot, and guys respect that, because he's going to come in and do his job. And I don't know if this is where you're going with it, but that kind of leads me to Chase Claypool, because I'm curious to see what his trajectory is going to be, because this is a huge camp. And I think it's more about the mental side than it is the physical side, because he has all the physical traits and tools that you need to be successful. And talking about that wide receiver depth chart, we were saying that it's probably Matt Hollins as wide receiver 5. And then right after that, you have Claypool, Justin Shorter, and KJ Hamler battling for wide receiver 6, maybe 7 if they decide to keep one. But I think this is going to be huge for Claypool because I think this is going to be from the neck up. They want to test him and see how is he going to respond. Is he going to show up late? Is he going to be there for his teammates? Is he going to be willing to do things when the ball's not in his hands, like someone like Mac Hollins will?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is Chase Claypool's ability to play special teams. I mean, I think that if he's able to do that and what he's shown that he was able to do in college and what he's shown to do in general throughout his career with Ben Roethlisberger, I mean, I really think that it's Chase Claypool's job. I really think so. I felt that way from the beginning. I felt that Chase Claypool has a leg up on the 6th receiver job, and Justin Shorter, Andy Isabella, and KJ Hamler as the main practice squad candidates, first guys up in need with injury. That's kind of how I feel the Bills. I don't think the Bills will feel like they're going to get a guy poached at this position. I really don't. So I think that they can stash whomever they would like, Terrell Shavers, whoever they would like on the practice squad. So preseason's pretty big for this unit. I'm pretty sure the Bills now, including Matt Collins, have 5 locks. Kevin, do you agree 5 locks at this point, or you still only give him 4 locks? Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure of 5 locks.
I think so. I mean, are we confident that MVS has a role on this team? Because I
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the moment that they signed him was kind of like a tell for me about how they want to run their offense. So as soon as he signed that contract, I said, this is pretty much going to be like that guaranteed vertical deep threat. This is exactly what the Bills needed. Unless he just shows up and just does not perform at all and totally underwhelms, then maybe they make a move. But as long as he shows up and plays consistently and consistently well, I would say that he is wide receiver 4, Hollins wide receiver 5, locking in 5 wide receivers, leaving probably just one position open as we, move down the chain here.
For sure. Like, I think that ultimately there is going to be a good competitive battle at that 6 receiver spot. But I do think there's 5. There's nothing that's going to change my mind yet on the 5 locks. I think that that's where I'm going to stay. And I think that, there's going to be a great receiver 6 battle. If no one steps up, the Bills could get witty and waive everybody if they need that roster spot. But I do think that battle for receiver 6 is going to be very, very intriguing as we push forward. We're going to definitely need a few more days of training camp. The offense looked great today in general. Looked for once ahead of the defense, which is stunning. I think it leads to this. One of the reasons why is the ability of that offensive line. The one thing I wanted to touch on early, it just seemed like a 5-man show. 6 of the returning 7 players have returned, including Ryan Vandemark. I would consider the swing tackle. That's what he won last year, and he's the first tackle off the board. He would be the first guy in the game in any situation. So he's returning. And then obviously David Edwards was in the game at times as the 6th offensive lineman. He was the backup guard last year. So the Bills are returning everybody but Mitch Morse in the top 7. Ryan Bates was probably 8. Alec Anderson was 9. And then Jermaine Ifedi was 10, was replaced by La'el Collins. So as you look at the roster, 7 players, including Alec Anderson, and then really the top 6 guys, they have a lot of experience on this O-line. And by all accounts, there was not a lot of mishaps there. The offensive line was winning all day. I think it's an underrated strength of this roster. The Bills have a nice young guard in Osiris Torrance. They have 2 bookend tackles. They really liked what they saw out of a Super Bowl winning player in David Edwards, especially underneath Aaron Cromer. And then, the transition for a more natural, seamless player in that length and arm length, supposedly to be an upgrade to Mitch Morse at the center position. Josh seemed to be pretty comfortable with Connor McGovern. Is that a lock in the 5 starting positions? And then obviously behind them, Vandemark. I mean, what's your opinion on how good the offensive line been? I don't think the Bills, a lot of people are talking about the Bills enough about the offensive line, who finished in the top 3 in aggregate advanced metrics. Mitch Morse alone, the swapping of Mitch Morse for David Edwards in the starting lineup is not going to be enough for me to knock them too far down. And then Will Clapp getting second team center reps instead of Van Pran Granger. It's still early, but it doesn't seem like there's a much battle across the offensive line. That's encouraging, right? Like, I mean, the Bills have a group of 5 that have all been in this offense before. The swing tackle's been in the offense. Are you comfortable now in a unit that in a couple of years ago was a huge weakness?
Yeah, and I was pretty, I don't want to say worried, but I was a little bit skeptical as soon as they got rid of Mitch Morse, because I would consider him the anchor of that offensive line, and he was really one of the key reasons for Josh Allen's ascension, and they had that chemistry down. So as soon as the Bills cut him this year, I was like, oh man, what's happening here? And obviously you had all the other cuts that kind of made that message go a little bit further. I think that extended our worries a little bit, because if it was just Mitch Morse, you'd say, okay, but then when you get rid of Diggs and Poyer, Hyde, Trey White, that just kind of, blows everything up a little bit. But now that you look at it, I really like Cedric Van Pran Granger. And I won't go too in depth because I want to save that for our topic at the end. But considering that they drafted him, they signed Will Clapp, they signed La'el Collins, like you mentioned, and all the guys that they're returning, I'm pretty confident. And of course, I'm gonna miss Mitch Morse, but I almost feel like there's not going to be a drop off. And could we see this offensive line be even better, even though they're missing again what I would call that anchor of the line? You do have McGovern sliding over one position. You have David Edwards, who was comfortable playing the position that he was last year. So even though they're kind of shuffling around a little bit, like these are the same players, and as long as they can stay healthy, I'm almost wondering if this line could be better than what they were last year, especially after under a full year with Joe Brady at the helm of OC.
It's certainly possible, and that's, I think, a totally underrated discussion point on what they can do with this offensive line. I mean, a lot of people are just automatically downgrading it, and even if you give it a slight downgrade from Edwards and McGovern from Morse and McGovern last year, even if you want to consider that a downgrade, it's slight, right? And they finished, by all accounts, in all of the advanced metrics. Obviously, Josh Allen has a lot to do with this, but the sack rate was down, pressured, time to get to Allen was down, total time to reach the pass rusher, from the pass rusher to the quarterback, was much in the Bills' favor. So a lot of issues that were, quite frankly, corrected from the year prior. So ultimately, I think that this roster, I'm not even sure if it's a downgrade or not, Kevin. I think that this roster is in good shape on the offensive line, and it's just a team that is strong in tight end, strong at the offensive line, obviously strong at the quarterback position. We feel pretty good about the running back. Frank Gore, we'll talk about running back in a second. The offense was ticking on all cylinders, and that's mostly what people wanted to see as we approach the first day of training camp. And it's going to be wildly interesting to see what they can do, even in preseason, let alone week 1 against the Cardinals.
That kind of reminds me. I was thinking today, speaking of Mitch Morse and losing all those key pieces. So even though the Bills lost a lot of talent and leadership and experience, like they lost 6 captains between Diggs, Davis, Poyer, Hyde, Tyler Matakevich, and the aforementioned Mitch Morse. So the only 2 returning captains are Josh Allen and Von Miller. So again, a lot of those key pieces, the core is gone. But then I got to thinking, I was like, for as much as people are worried and saying like, oh man, like what are we going to do here? This is kind of a reload year. The Bills have one of the top duos at arguably 5 positions, like a top duo in the entire NFL here. So if you take a look at the tight end room, I would say that Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, they are one of the top tight end duos in the league. You go to linebacker, a healthy Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard. That is one of the best duos in the league. Defensive tackle, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, one of the best duos in the league. Cornerback, Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford, one of the best duos in the league. And maybe if Ray Davis really shines, considering that James Cook was 4th in the league in rushing last year, if he can continue on, especially with Joe Brady's offense, you sprinkle in Ray Davis, that could be a really nice 1-2 punch. I could almost see running back being one of the top duos here. And then if Von Miller comes back to form and Greg Russo continues to take another step, you could put defensive end in that category. If Cole Bishop gets acclimated quicker than anticipated, maybe the safety room is looking better than we think. So the point is, even though the Bills lost a lot, like there is still a lot of talent here. And the beauty of it is they have a bunch of different skill sets that you can mix in and sprinkle in around those guys, and good depth on top of it.
And what's great about this entire offense is this running back room, right? Davis seems like a nice upgrade to the backup running back room. What are they going to get from Ty Johnson? It's just, it just seems to me like the Bills upgraded across, minus Diggs, upgraded across this offense. And that's what we keep saying is absolutely they don't have a upgrade to Diggs. They didn't go out and do anything there. But they may have upgraded everywhere else and was pretty underratedly from the bottom of the roster, the middle of the roster. They just didn't get a direct receiver 1 right off the bat. Who knows if someone that they have on their roster can develop into that. But Ray Davis, like he's an intriguing option. Ty Johnson's clearly a favorite of Joe Brady. But Ray Davis is said to be like competing now and should be get first team snaps sooner rather than later. And even Frank Gore Jr. has made a couple of plays just receiving the ball. They definitely upgraded what these four running backs can do receiving the ball. Even Darrington Evans is not a slouch in the return game or in terms of receiving. He should have a role in the practice squad here. But the Bills made a concerted effort to get pass catching running backs behind James Cook, who obviously he's a pass catching running back himself if he can limit the drops. I mean, this running game has, with this offensive line and what they were able to do with Joe Brady at the end of last year against good teams, it's got you pretty intrigued at what this running back unit now with Ray Davis and his receiving game ability is able to do, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think you put it pretty well that the Bills roster improved as a whole, but that loss of Diggs is so significant that it makes you a little bit worried. And That's kind of what the Sabres did this year. I'm not trying to get into a hockey tangent here, but I was thinking about that too, where, like the Sabres filled out their bottom six. They just signed UPL today. I'm sure you saw that. So It looks like the Sabres roster is more well-rounded as a whole, but they still don't have that top six forward because they bought out Jeff Skinner, and it's like, okay, what are they going to do? It's kind of the same thing with the Bills, where I think that this roster is better as a whole, but a couple of those losses at the top are so significant, it kind of dampens that a little bit.
I think what's interesting too is that you're upgrading the middle to back end of your roster, which did have some issues. Like I will admit, I think the Bills were pretty top heavy last year, and you saw that into the play. The defense was just terrible. Like we can blame McDermott, we can blame whomever we'd want to blame on that. We can go across players. I mean, the roster just wasn't very good in the playoffs. They got absolutely ridiculed toward the end of the year. They got absolutely crushed against the Steelers in that cold weather game. I mean, they were trotting out very veteran practice squad linebackers. Terrell Dodson was even hurt. Like he missed some times. Like Dorian Williams had to be pressed in, and they had to bench him. He was off. He was just not ready yet at his stage of his career. Rasul Douglas was hurt. Dane Jackson I know there's he knows this defense, but he just got lost in certain coverages in that game. I thought he lost Travis Kelce on the touchdown. The safety play wasn't there. Like Kevin, they weren't able to do it. The bottom of the roster just wasn't able to come through for him. But with all the draft picks, what they were able to do to clear cap, I wanted to talk about what they were able to do in general with their cap situation in a little bit. But I just think that injuries got in the way, but ultimately this roster was elevated. And then if you really look on that offensive side of the ball specifically, they were able to do something. Like you had Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy doing nothing in the playoffs, like literally nothing. Like they were not able to. They were not able to help out. I mean, we rag on Gabe Davis, but he makes some of those plays in that game. His height, his ability to come down with big plays, drops or not. Like there were certainly plays left on the board by that receiver group. So the Bills said, we are going to improve receiver in general. We're going to improve running back in general from Latavius Murray, Leonard Fournette, whoever else that they were trotting out there at times. Damian Harris. Their tight end unit in general still pretty strong. They were able to retool their offensive line a little bit, but still a super strength for them. The Bills' offense and what they're able to do to me is a really intriguing talking point as we hit middle of training camp coming soon. That's going to be an intriguing part to me. Are you excited for this offense? I mean, after you actually sit down and think about it, I know Diggs is gone. Looks like he's in Houston. Looked like he was in the middle of a fight already out there. Are you intrigued?
I didn't see that today.
Yeah, he was in the middle of a fight out there from Houston training camp. I mean, he just seems to be chasing young quarterbacks on rookie deals. Is that to get paid himself or what? I'm not really sure what his ultimate play is to catch the next trendy team. He's a very productive player. He'll play 3 to 4 years probably remaining. I mean, he's really only on a 1-year deal. But this Bills offense is in really good shape. And it's exciting. Like I'm intrigued to see this. The offense played pretty well down the stretch. It wasn't how he wanted it to look with Diggs getting 40 catches. But I recall earlier last year, everyone was like, all they got is Diggs. All they're doing is throwing to Diggs 10 times. The Bills flipped that on the second half of the year, and they're like, they're never getting Diggs involved. Like, what's going on? So I think that what's going to be interesting is you don't have to worry about that anymore. And it's going to be, quite frankly, pretty tough to game plan for the Bills offense because it's like, do you double Shakir, like double Kincaid? Like it's not going to make sense to a lot of defensive coordinators before when the offensive or the defensive game plan was to stop Diggs and then hopefully stop the Bills. But with the difference between the Bills and the Sabres, to your point, they have the number 2 player in the NFL, like the number 2 player in all of sports, like Josh Allen, and his elevation of the rest of the team. If the Sabres had that, I'd feel pretty good about where they were at. They did do a good job building the back of their roster like the Bills have, but the ultimate equalizer in any sport and in any team, Josh Allen, I mean, he would just looked like an absolute savvy veteran in what he was able to do. And Keon Coleman was some of those contested catches where the Bills struggled. That's got to be exciting to you in general for the offense, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, to your question about, am I excited about the offense and how are they going to look? I am excited because we've been talking all summer and spring for that matter, that I really believe that this offense is going to look way better in person than it does on paper. Because to the naked eye, you're like, really? Curtis Samuel could potentially be your wide receiver 1. Mac Hollins is getting that much praise from Josh Allen. Wow, the Bills are really going down the drain. But I know that they have a plan. And we've been talking about that plan throughout the offseason. And I really think that Joe Brady is the right guy for the job here. So I am excited. And one other point that I want to make, when you said, what did Deontay Hardy and Trent Sherfield do? I said they just dropped passes. I will say they did clinch us a division. They won us that Week 18 game in Miami, so I will give them that. But that kind of shows, to your point about being top heavy and not having that depth throughout the playoffs, it kind of caught up to them because, yes, Sherfield and Hardy were good enough to get us to that 4th straight division title, but they weren't good enough to get us past the Chiefs. They weren't good enough to get us past that divisional round. So that's why you saw this roster shakeup, and you're hoping that guys like MVS, plucking him from the Chiefs roster, Claypool, a healthy Justin Shorter, Mac Hollins. We keep talking about Mac Hollins, Curtis Samuel, all these guys, Keon Coleman, obviously. Another year from Khalil Shakir. So you're hoping that they really built that depth, and this is what that offense, specifically the wide receiver room, needed.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting as you look through the offense, I'm pretty excited for the offense. I think we can break down what that will be as we develop more into the offseason, into the training camp, into preseason, I should say, not offseason. I think today was the first day of preseason. And it's going to be fun to see how they develop into the Bears game. I think they generally play their starters game 2 and game 3. That's what they did last year. Maybe they cut that back down to 1 game this year. I mean, generally that's what they do is play Josh 1 game. Just due to the fact I think that Steelers game was weird. There were some weird circumstances in that game to where the offense didn't really do anything. So they're like, yeah, you got to play in the game 3. I was totally okay with that decision. But I don't know if they'll end up being just 1 game. But as you get into the Bears game, I'm really looking forward to seeing what this offense should be ahead of the Bears defense. So you will see some really good stuff from the Bills offense. And there's going to definitely be some fan favorites, man. We've talked about some of them. Will Claypool? Will it be Hamler? Will it be, who could it be that'll show up that really will catch Bills fans' eye? Will it be Frank Gore Jr.? Yeah, I mean, sure, Frank Gore Jr. Literally, a guy that can probably do a lot here. He's gonna, unless he totally fails, he's definitely going to be a guy that people are rooting for. Like Frank Gore Jr. is going to be a guy that Bills fans are going to be clamoring for. He's going to get a ton of carries, and he's going to catch the ball out of the backfield because people just, they're not going to run cloud coverages too much in covering the running back out of the backfield overly. So they don't really care if you're going to throw it to your 3rd, 4th running back. So he's definitely going to touch the ball a lot. So he could be a fan favorite. I don't know how much they're going to play James Cook and Ty Johnson, but we'll see. And as we kind of finish talking about the skill players by the return game, so that's what's interesting to me is that one of these guys are going to be able to make the roster in the return game. And could it be KJ Hamler, Andy Isabella? Is it going to be, obviously, is it be Hardy, a guy they drafted who to me was one of my favorite guys to return the football in college. So that's a really interesting thing to note from this returning game. But who's going to win it? But those are some of the early options. One of those guys is going to take a roster spot.
I would say right now, I would lean towards Hardy just because he's a draft pick and you wouldn't lose as much capital if you were to get rid of KJ Hamler or Andy Isabella for that matter. So I feel like just because the Bills drafted him in the 6th round, I know it's just a 6th round pick, but he can be Terran's backup in the slot. He can play nickel and then he can help on special teams. But I don't know, that is interesting with KJ Hamler because what is his like best role for an NFL offense? Would it probably be a vertical deep threat or put him in the slot, gadget, backfield stuff? Like, would he be a Curtis Samuel? Would he be more like an MVS? How do you see KJ Hamler fitting into this offense?
Yeah, he'd be another versatile piece if he's able to make the roster and edge out on that six. I mean, it doesn't take much for one of these guys to get the 6 receiver job. I think we're just automatically saying it's Shorter because they drafted him, or it's Claypool because he was been good in the past. It really could be any of them. If they do one thing well and they're able to show a deep threat ability, he's able to move around, he's able to play in the slot, he's able to return. That's enough for them to make the roster, especially as the 6th receiver. That's what you're looking for. You're not looking for the next receiver 1 being your receiver 6. So it would be enough to edge out the other guys. KJ Hamler does have the athletic profile. He's always hurt. So that's just like John Ross. It's just like any of those other guys that had high profile athletic profiles who's just quite frankly never healthy. If he's healthy and he's putting it all together and he's returning and he's showing deep threat ability, those aren't going to cut him. That's a position that I feel pretty comfortable with, that receiver 6 is going to be earned on this roster. I mean, and ultimately, if there's need for 2 different, the only way that a receiver 7 would ever make this roster is if they play multiple positions. Returner can play in the backfield. Maybe it's Hamler. Can do a lot of things on special teams in the return game. That's Mack Hollins is going to be able to help you there too. So that's where things get really intriguing. But the Bills have a lot going for them in this entire unit. And it's going to be fun to track the return job as well all offseason. So it's going to be something I'm looking forward to seeing as well.
So who would you say that KJ Hamler compares to the most on this roster? Because I'm thinking off the top of my head, he could be an improved version of Isaiah McKenzie. Do you think that would be a good comp?
I think so. I mean, I think that that's a fair comp. Yeah. I mean, a more polished route runner than Isaiah McKenzie was. So I think that that's a fair comp. McKenzie may have a little bit more of the gadgetness in him, but yeah, I think that that's a pretty good comparison to what he's done in the past. Curtis Samuel, we haven't seen him a lot, kind of rings a bell to me as well. Could he be kind of the Curtis Samuel type? But I really expect Hamler to be able to do a lot of different things. So I'm really intrigued by this 6. And then if they really go off the cuff and just say, you know what, we're going to roster Hardy as the returner, and then Shavers is going to make the roster because he's super good on special teams. They could, you know what I mean? They could go any way that they want with that role, and they haven't stopped in the past. Just like they've rostered Jay Kummer for years with decent to limited receiving skills, but does help on a lot of different units. So that's the thing of note, that where the Bills are really going to make their decisions. It's going to be a fun one to track all offseason, just like a couple other position groups on the defensive side of the ball. But, we got to turn our attention to defense. But first, smash that like button to our sponsors, the Summit Center and Larson-Timko and Dave Dengler. Thank you so much. To Monster Energy. We're really excited to have them as a sponsor of Built in Buffalo, as well as all of the podcasts and live shows on the Built in Buffalo network. Kevin, like the defense, definitely there's been some really, Matt Milano's back. The linebacking core looks really intriguing to me. Von Miller looks back without any limitations. The defensive tackle unit to me is an upgrade to where it was last year. Possibly 2 of the best boundary corners that they've had. You have Kyer Elam with a fresh slate, looked good all spring. Obviously Taron Johnson's just a beast playing interior. Is the safety unit, I mean, they had some challenges today in the safety unit, but to be expected for 2 brand new starters for the Bills defense. What are some of your initial thoughts of this Bills defense as, will Bobby Babbage call plays? Will Sean McDermott call plays? By all accounts, the offense was ahead with Josh Allen and the offensive line. That's to be expected. It's kind of flipped from a team that's developing a quarterback or has a vet guy that's just learning the system like the Bills have had prior to Josh Allen. With Josh Allen, the offense is just going to be ahead now. I think when you have a guy like Mahomes or Allen, a couple other guys, the offense is just ready to go. Like, it's just what it is. But give me your initial reaction to the Bills defense.
Well, I think my first reaction is that there is still loads of talent on this side of the ball. And I feel like a lot of us, myself included, could get hung up sometimes on the household names that they lost. Trey White, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. But there are so many names that are on this roster where it's like, holy cow, like this defense, if they're healthy, they are loaded. And that goes back to the point that I was making. I mean, a top duo at defensive tackle, a top duo at linebacker, a top duo at corner. Not to mention, like you said, defensive tackle, the depth that they have with Dwayne Carter, Austin Johnson, defensive end. I said defensive tackle the first time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I just want to make sure I didn't say the wrong one.
No,
So
you're good.
defensive tackle, I really like the duo of Oliver and Daquan, but defensive end, again, if you can get Von to come back to the old Von Miller of some sort, mixed in with AJ Epinesa, Greg Rousseau, and who knows, maybe someone like a Javon Solomon can flash. Like, there are just so many different options on this defense. But the one thing that I'll say is that even though I just said that we're getting caught up on these household names, specifically the defensive backs, that is still like the one concern that I have, especially considering the depth there. And Sal Capaccio touched on that today too. So it's not just me beating the dead horse here by saying that the Bills should go get Patrick Peterson or another bounty corner. Like, I think this is somewhat of a
Commenters are going to be mad at you, Kevin, for Patrick Peterson again. They're going to get mad at you.
Yeah. But I think it is somewhat of a concern because what are your thoughts on DeMar getting first team reps today? Like, is that anything to read into, or is that just how they decide to line up? And we probably shouldn't read into it because it's July 24th.
Yeah, I wouldn't read into it. Mike Edwards was hurt all off season, and Cole Bishop's learning a little bit. Like I wouldn't read anything into it. I think that's just a reward for his perseverance, knowing the defense in general. Definitely starting in this Sean McDermott defense in the past. That doesn't hurt. I mean, mixed results. I don't think he was very good in 2022. But it is what it is. I mean, a lot of people will argue that. I don't think he was good in coverage. He was good against run defense, missed a lot of tackles from when I was looking up some advanced statistics. But sure, I guess he's right in it. I mean, I guess his roster spot's probably safer than we thought all offseason. I will probably say that. They're already paying him. I think with the incident, I think his contract is guaranteed. So I have no idea how that works now if he's cut. The Bills will reward him on special teams. I think he makes a roster based on his vet and what he does for the league and what he knows and what he does in the locker room. I don't really think there's any reason to make sure D. Delaney makes the roster. D. Delaney could make the roster anyways, or Cam Lewis. But I mean, maybe he's closer to the roster than we initially did in our early roster projections. I don't think either of us had him making it, did we?
No, that was a tough decision that we had to make because he was one of the as Joe Lenardi would say, last four out compared to our last four in. And it's tough because you're trying to figure out who's going to make the team. And to all your points, like I think they do want DeMar around. I want DeMar around. I don't want him to get cut, but I don't know. Are they going to keep five safeties? Because I think they really like Cam Lewis.
Maybe. Once again, it's just like receiver to me. So then absolutely you're going to have to start to pull from somewhere. So the safety unit is going to, you need guys that can really contribute on special teams. And if so, I mean, if DeMar can, Cam Lewis obviously can. I mean, I don't know about the three guys, Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop. Like, I don't know about that. But ultimately, like if those three guys are subbing in the offense, you need everybody else in the defensive backfield to be able to play special teams except the starters. So you're definitely going to need to make the roster like DeMar. If you can play special teams, Cam Lewis is probably, because of his special teams, I don't think he's like on the roster because he's the best safety in the league. I think he's on the roster because he does a lot in this defense, can play a lot of different positions, can back up a few spots. He's going to take over Saran Neal, play special teams on pretty much every unit. It is what it is. They need roster spots for that. I'm glad they've cut a lot of those guys like Matakevich and Kumaro and Neal and some of the other guys who've done it in the past. So they definitely need some guys that play special teams. Though Cam Lewis does a little bit of everything. I think he's a roster lock just due to that versatility. But if he comes out and struggles and is awful and just doesn't do enough, then I mean, of course he can get caught. But I think that his special teams ability alone will, add depth to each of the position groups, nickel corner. I mean, it's Hardy that's going to have to prove that he's a good backup nickel to Taron Johnson and can return the ball. It's him that the Bills could always try to sneak through to their practice squad. We kind of put him on the roster, but especially if he's average to in the same neck and neck with another player returning, the Bills will probably try to sneak him onto the practice squad, Kevin.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I kept the little note that I wrote here a few weeks ago when we did our roster. Mm-hmm. And I wrote down each position and how many players that we decided to keep with our early season projections here. And I feel like the one outlier could be offensive line, maybe even defensive line too, because we kept 10 offensive linemen, 10 defensive linemen. So 20 total players just from the two lines. You might be able to pick one or two of those players and say, you know what, we probably have a better chance of stashing Will Clapp on the practice squad than we do DeMar, because someone like the Steelers would pick up DeMar. Same with KJ Hamler. You might say maybe we should keep KJ Hamler on the active roster because someone would take him off waivers, and maybe we'll just have to shed. I'm just throwing a name out there, Casey Toohill. You know, maybe we can try to put him back on the practice squad because we don't want to lose KJ Hamler. So maybe it comes down to the lines. Maybe they don't need 20 total linemen because, again, they can put some on the practice squad.
Right.
But I think it is going to be hard when you have guys like KJ Hamler and DeMar who are right on the outside looking in or the inside looking out.
I agree with you. Yeah, I think it's certainly going to be a really uphill battle for a couple of guys on the roster spots, and we're going to get through. We're going to get through some of that as we approach camp. It's just day one. I was just happy to see nobody on PUP. Chase Claypool got dinged up a little bit at the end of practice, but was said to be okay, walking around fine. Was said to be totally, in good spirit. So that's, just to have that kind of start to training camp is always intriguing, especially offensively. The linebacking depth, though, something we haven't touched on yet. Terrell Bernard or Matt Milano make a worlds of difference. They're going to be able to guard some of the best tight ends in the league. They're going to be able to contain the middle of the field. You know, one thing we forget, Terrell Bernard had 6.5 sacks. Six and a half. Right. I mean, the dude does everything. He was robbed of an all-pro. Like, he was ready to put on a performance against Travis Kelce. The Bills, I just didn't think had much hope with him and Milano both out of the game. I just don't think that's what ticks in this McDermott and safety, but that's just what ticks in this defense. With them both out, it's just not possible. It's just the middle of your defense being removed. Like, and then the boundary corners being backups and hurt themselves. There just wasn't anything there, in my opinion, to rebound from. It's just missing too many defensive players and a gutsy performance of Josh Allen as always. But that middle of the defense, they were routing teams in the first 4 weeks. The Dolphins, the Commanders were coming in. Could they be anything? And the Raiders, a couple other teams, but they were winning convincingly against teams early on this season. Prior to that Jacksonville game where they went in, everybody got hurt in that turf between Jones and Milano, missing the middle of your defense right there. Put a lot of stress on Bernard. But this Bernard-Milano combination is going to be a fun one, especially with Christian Benford, Taron Johnson, and Rasul Douglas filling in for a Trey White. Where Rasul Douglas right now in his career today is better than Trey White. Like, we forget that, Trey White was, he struggled last year on his year back, and then got hurt again. Obviously, he was starting to play better and then tore that Achilles. So just right now, Rasul Douglas, unfortunately, is an upgrade to Trey White. Christian Benford, another year, just looks like the dude. Like, he's physical. I mean, losing him in the playoffs was as big of a. I mean, the Bills' defense, what they trotted out was just backups, dude. It was just B-level, C-level players across the board with old safeties. So what they're going to be able to do now from day one with this linebacking core, and then behind them with the backup linebacking core, which is much improved, like, you got to feel a little bit more confident that maybe they can stop some of these good offenses in the clutch.
Yeah, and just to answer your question, just to sum it up, I think that this defense is loaded with talent throughout the whole defense at all three levels.
Yep.
But they're just top heavy at defensive back. And I feel like it kind of flipped where they were top heavy at wide receiver last year and they didn't have that depth. So they worked on building out that depth at wide receiver, but they lost Diggs. And now it's kind of different where, like, they have some studs on this defense. But then it's like, what do you have behind your safeties who you're hoping are going to replace Poyer and Hyde? What do you have behind Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford? Because, like, Kyer Elam, this is a huge year for him. Jamarcus Ingram, he's going to have to take a step up unless there's another move that they make over the summer here. But, like, this defense is loaded if they can all stay healthy. But that's a huge if. So I think they just need to work on filling out the depth a little bit more, specifically on that back end.
Yeah, the back end is going to be the thing where they did upgrade the depth. I think they upgraded it at defensive tackle. Like, I think Austin Johnson and Dwayne Carter are much improved, like, to the ghost of Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle. They're bringing in Linville Joseph. Like, I mean, those guys are decent in their prime. It wasn't very good. Like it just Daquan Jones went out and it was a complete issue all season. Like it
Poona
just
Ford
wasn't
never
good.
really worked out as much
Poona
as I was
Ford was
rooting
a
for him.
freaking flop. Like I was hoping for him. I was excited for him. He flopped. It's not like the Bills paid him a ton of money. They did pay him. I can't remember. I'd have to pull it up, around $3 million spread out with some. I think with a void year. They thought more of him than just being basically an inactive toward the end of the year depth player. Like the Bills brought in Linval Joseph to take a role. They were utilizing Tim Settle a lot. Like he literally could not figure out this defense, and the Bills maybe took a shot on him in his style. But I already think Deshaun Williams Deshaun Williams and Eli Ankou, 5th and 6th there on the depth chart. Those guys would have been, Williams specifically would have been a nice help last year. And Dwayne Carter I think is a steal. Like he's going to be a steal. Like we're not talking about him enough. He was basically a free draft choice, and he's going to be a steal upgrade behind the 2 starters. And then just getting Jones back in general once again, I'm pretty excited for this. And then the defensive ends, like behind Rousseau and Epinesa and Von Miller, you still have Dwayne Smoot, who slept on, Javon Solomon, the rookie, who got the most sacks in college football last year. Casey Tuhill, you mentioned him, probably going to get. Kingsley Jonathan was on the roster last year, and Shaq Lawson, I don't think obviously Shaq's not on the team, but Kingsley Jonathan's not going to make the roster. He's going to have to beat out Solomon and Casey Tuhill. I just don't see it. He's going to just be another guy who's a high profile guy, high energy guy, on the practice squad. But the defensive, I think the depth is really good. And in the linebacker room, Dorian Williams, Balin Spector, Olafoshio, Nicholas Morrow, Deion Jones specifically, that is a good looking unit to me. Behind last year, it was Matakevich and Dorian Williams. And I mean, there was literally nobody there. So that was a huge issue. And then obviously later in the year, AJ Klein, but it was a huge issue. So I think they've corrected the front 7 depth, but you're right. Safety's got some depth. It really does. D. Delaney, DeMar Hamlin, Mike Edwards, Cole Bishop, Taylor Rapp, whatever you want to consider, Cam Lewis. I think safety has the depth. It doesn't have the top tier 1 safety. I think it has the depth, but you're right at corner where you really only have some really solid looking starters. Got a nice looking Kyer Elam, but behind that, there are definitely some concerns. And I wouldn't be shocked if your prediction comes through. I mean, look, Kyer Elam shows so many good things, and then he gets handsy, which would have been a pass interference, and McDermott's yelling at him again.
Was that today?
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Yeah. I mean, he just gets too handsy. He doesn't believe in his athletic ability, or I'm not exactly sure what it is. And then you got to stop practice between him. And then obviously I think there was a mishap between, I couldn't remember if it was Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards or Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp. I thought it was Bishop and Rapp, where he had to stop practice to coach there as well. But Elam's just getting handsy. I forgot if it was with Claypool or which receiver it was, MVS. I forgot whom it was. But that's him in a nutshell, where he gets a pass interference down on the 2-yard line in the playoffs and then picks it off the next play. So that consistency needs to filter in. I mean, this is his 3rd year. It's got to come together. It did for AJ Epinesa, who's now a pretty nice looking rotational defensive end, probably a starter, or at least a 1B on this roster. So it's got to come together for Kyer. There's still time. But he's their backup plan at cornerback. He's the guy you've been personally trying to look for, boundary. He is the first guy in. He's the guy that's going to get starts. He's probably going to start in training camp, throughout training camp as well as preseason games. But will they bring in a veteran presence? I think they'll see how the corner room does, and this is where McDermott is strength. So Kevin, I want to ask you, McDermott, although I agree with you, corner is probably the weakest depth on the roster. I think I agree with you there. What do you do in a situation to where, I don't know, everyone has varying levels of Sean McDermott trust, but the one thing that I trust Sean McDermott for, and is why maybe they have shed some money at safety, is safety and cornerback. He's been able to turn a bunch of guys in his career, whether it's Levi Wallace, Dane Jackson to some extent being successful at times. It's, early on when they had to trade away some of their corner room, when McDermott first arose, and they're playing guys that were just revived. Kevin Johnson comes to mind, of being fairly, successful at times. So, I mean, do you trust McDermott? It's one thing to trust him with 13 seconds left in the AFC divisional round. It's another to like he does have strengths, and I think his absolute strengths are DBs. So like, is he going to pull another corner revive project? One of these undrafted free agents? I think we're gonna and Benford. We didn't bring up Benford. How good Benford's been on this roster development project from this defensive staff. Whoever you want to credit for it, McDermott oversees it. But will it be someone like Karon Brown? Will it be? I know a lot of people like what they've seen already from Lovely, undrafted free agent corner. Will it be Daquan Hardy? So like, will they go out and get somebody? But do you trust him at the defensive back position?
I do, but I don't want to rely on his coaching abilities, because look what happened in January last year against the Chiefs. You can only do so much when you're trotting out those B and C players like you mentioned. So I would trust him more if they go get that veteran. I'm not going to keep saying Patrick Peterson, because maybe there's a trade, and there are going to be some cuts too. So there are going to be some other free agents who are available. You can probably wait, even if you want to wait for the 53-man cut down and then sign someone. But it's going to be interesting, because if Elam doesn't take that next step within the next couple of weeks, they might look to bring someone in now, because again, like, this defense is so good. And like you said, there's depth and talent on the line, depth and talent at linebacker. But right now there's just talent at DB. Like, I don't see the depth. And you're right, like, safety has a little bit more depth. I think it's just because of the loss of Hyde and Poyer that you're thinking that the depth isn't as good, because you're not working with as much.
Right.
But I mean, to our points that we've been making at corner, like, there's just no depth there, because Benford always gets hurt. Russell Douglas, we haven't seen him for a full year, but he was injury prone a lot last year. So if you're like, Kyer Elam's going to have to play this year. And then if he goes down, or let's just say Douglas and Benford go down, are you going to trust Elam and Ingram to hold things down for the whole year? Like, if you go 10 weeks and then you have an injured Douglas and an injured Benford, and you have the Chiefs and the 49ers coming to town here, and it's Kyer Elam and Jamarcus Ingram, I mean, are we going to be confident with that?
That's going to be a tough one, man. A lot of people don't think they're going to bring in a corner. There's definitely been some.
As I just finished, I just read his comment, get off the cornerback. No, I'm not going to get off it, because we could seriously be looking at a repeat of last year if that happens, because I would have to look. But has Christian Benford played a full season yet? Like, the first 2 years, he's been dinged up both times, right?
I mean, very short term, but yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and Russell Douglas, again, I would have to look at his career, but I know based on last year, I mean, it's a physical position, and they play physical, and they hit hard. So you're going to miss some games here. So I have Douglas here. He played 14 games back in 2017, 16, 14, 12, 17, and 16. Okay, so I mean, overall, he's been pretty good, but they're going to get dinged up every now and then. So you're going to need Elam and Ingram to come in for 2 to 4 games, if not more.
I mean, hey, you're not wrong. I mean, even Taron Johnson himself is so physical that he exposes himself. Maybe that was where they decided that Daquan Hardy could be a useful player as well on the roster. So there's definitely, I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I think they'll want to see how training camp goes. If there's any dings and injuries, I'm intrigued by what they're thinking at corner. Like, do they think, Jamarcus Ingram, a guy that against Miami 2 seasons ago, when like everybody got hurt and he was called up from the practice squad for that 1 week in the Heat game, he was pretty good. And I was like, wow, like, I was shocked. I thought he was literally a fodder. Like, how could he ever play? But they shut down that offense the entire game. It was actually the Bills' offense that struggled against the Dolphins, and the only time they've ever lost to them in recent memory. And the Bills still almost won. But they were rolling out DeMar Hamlin. They were rolling out Hardy, Ingram. So, like, they were running like an entire. I remember it being just Poyer and a bunch of backups, if I recall correctly. And it was the point of the story being with Ingram being successful to me. And then last year, I thought he was really good. I thought he almost made the roster out of training camp. So I think the Bills probably have more hope in Ingram. and this love for Kyron Brown and this love for Lovely, the college free agent. I don't know if I buy into any of it. And then obviously drafting Daquan Hardy for the nickel spot. I don't know if I buy into any of it yet. But I'm not sure if I'm going to buy into this Lovely love out of Western Michigan in the MAC. A conference that does throw the ball a lot, a conference that does develop some receivers at times. So that's what's intriguing to me, is that I'm sure McDermott has his favorite out of those guys we've just mentioned. It doesn't mean you should be negligent. He does usually have a veteran in the role, but he seems to have his eye on somebody that we're not talking about.
Yeah, and just so we're clear here, that like this isn't me knocking Jamarcus Ingram every time we bring this up. I mean, partly it is just because I don't know, like we haven't seen enough of Ingram. So yeah, like part of it is me saying that Ingram may not be good enough. Who knows? We'll see what transpires over the summer. But the other half of that is, what do you have behind Ingram? Because yeah, you probably only carry 4 boundary corners, but
Yes.
if one of them goes down, like you said, you have what's his first name? Kenny Lovely?
Yeah,
To
Kenai
Corey
Lovely.
Couch and
Yeah.
or Kenai Lovely to Corey Couch and Kyron Brown. So I mean, I'm just not thrilled with the depth there. So like, even if you don't even include Ingram, like just say you take those 4, say, okay, that's cool. I've never seen the Bills go into a training camp with like this many no names on the boundary, you know?
Might that be a spot where what's your thoughts on like maybe being somebody on someone else's roster? They've been known to trade late draft picks for players. Like look at Ryan Bates. They've done similar things. Like they've tried to make those back end of the roster moves with like who was it back in the day? They tried to make
Kalen Clay, Russell Bodine.
Yeah, a couple of those. Yeah, I mean, they've made a couple of back-end roster trades. It doesn't. We're always talking about Deebo Samuel. Like, it doesn't need to be Deebo Samuel, or I mean, just as likely as Bean's going to be like, there's a corner I like there, and all I have to do is trade them X player. Like they've done, believe it or not, they've done like player for player, like Eli Harold. They traded, like they've done like backup level player trades. A lot of people are like, this isn't Madden, but Bean pulls off these. Okay, where are you strong? You're strong at corner. Okay, I'll take your boundary corner. Is there like Eli Harold, like, at the time, like, or Casey Tuill, like Kingsley Jonathan, maybe there's a swap there. Something like that. It's not crazy. Like, it's not like Madden. He's literally pulled that off like almost at the end of camp every year. Like Keelan Clay is a good example. Obviously, this roster is a little deep, but there could be a backup level corner that the Bills like across the league, right? Like it's not, it doesn't need to be a current free agent. I do think it could be something they look at in late August based on how this unit performs.
Yeah, and they have that extra 6th-round pick from the Boogie Basham trade to play around with too. So even if you want to go a tick above and say, I mean, I don't know what the asking price would be, and I can't even think of a boundary corner off the top of my head that they could target. But if they were to just, I don't know, call the Browns and say, we'll give you a 6th-round pick for so-and-so, like maybe we could see something like that.
They stockpiled them for a reason, and I think Bean feels good. And then he can get a cost-controlled player. Like, so it's not a guy that you need to go sign a free agent deal to. So I think that's a place to look out for.
Yeah.
But maybe it's Kenai Lovely. Like maybe it's someone like Kenai Lovely that I think he had a really nice pick 6 in college. Like there's somebody on this roster is the reason they're not doing what you're saying. Like, cause I do believe that they would have done that. Brandon Beane's known to bring as many players into camp as possible. He doesn't ever mind doing that. Look at what you did with like, across many of the position groups throughout camp and throughout last year, like they'll bring depth in. But they like somebody here, and there's really no big tells at the moment. Like if you look through like their signing bonuses is the one place that I tried to look, but nothing really sticks out. The one that stuck out was the biggest signing bonus they gave to non-draft choice was Rondell Bothroyd, defensive end. So $15,000 signing bonus is nothing big. Keaton Bills is on the list. To Corey Couch got a little bit of a signing bonus, but there's nothing really there that sticks out to me of like they really liked one of these undrafted free agents. But there's got to be a guy that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are feeling awfully good about they brought in, and we just don't necessarily know it yet. But I think there'll be some tells. Whoever's playing with that, there's not enough boundary corner. So whoever's playing with that second unit with Kyer is definitely a guy that they like. I'm assuming you're going to see Hardy maybe as a backup nickel. You're going to see Kyer Elam a lot in the twos. But you're going to get a boundary corner there in that unit. Then I think that'll be the first early tell is who's going to play with that second team defensive unit. That'll be the guy that the Bills initially see as the guy that you're looking for. Is it Jamarcus Ingram that's earned that? Is it Kenai Lovely? Is it Kyron Brown? There's going to be someone there that they really like at that position that's going to play with, Cole Bishop and D. Delaney, maybe Mike Edwards even in there, and Dorian Williams and Olafosio and Dwayne Carter and Austin Johnson and Dwayne Smoot. It's a decent backup unit. So I want to see who they final piece is what you're asking for. I want to see who they start off in that final piece in the boundary corner, who is probably the last man on the roster.
I just want to throw a name out there because,
sure,
like I said, I didn't really have one when I said that off the top of my head. But I was looking at the Ravens depth chart here just because they stockpile corners. And I don't know if this is realistic or not, but I'm just thinking along these lines. So they have probably 5 good corners here. Now TJ Tampa is starting on PUP, so there is, a little bit of concern there. They'd probably want to move this guy up, but just think about trading like that 6th round pick for someone like a Jalen Armour Davis, because he's 5th on the depth chart. You have Marlon Humphrey,
sure,
Brandon Stevens, TJ Tampa, and then they drafted Nate Wiggins too with the 1st round pick. So Jalen Armour Davis was a 4th round pick in 2022. Yeah, he's young, and I don't know if the Ravens would want to give up on that young talent, especially considering they just covet those DBs. But again, someone like that who's kind of falling on the depth chart and they don't really have a roster spot for him, and they say, you know what? Fine. He might not even make the team, so we'll give him to you for that 6th round pick, sure. And the Bills will say, okay, because we have 2 6th round picks, but we don't have enough boundary corners, so we help you, you help us, something like that.
Agree with you, man. I think that's a fair assessment way to look at it. All right, time to talk about, I want to get to this too. Once again, thank you to our show sponsors, the Summit Center, Monster Energy, Dave Dengler, and Larson-Timko Funeral Home. Wanted to mention your list now. I know you created a list that I wanted to get to talk to as what we should be doing to look forward into training camp, your top 5 things that you're looking forward to, that you're looking toward, as other people should be watching for too. Let's get started with it, man. Thanks to everybody for tuning in for the last hour. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what we have in store and what you think should be in store for Bills training camp.
Before I start with this, one last thing to put a bow on the DB talk. Did you hear what Bean had to say about Micah Hyde today?
I did. Yep.
I thought that was interesting because that's something else that we've been talking about, where we've been saying maybe this could be like a Lorenzo Alexander situation where they might just say, hey, we don't really need you, but like if there's a fit and we can make it work contractually, like financially, and if you want to come back, we'll definitely be open to it. And sure enough, Bean said today, he's working out. Nothing really has changed yet. We haven't heard one way or another, but he's staying ready. And as soon as I heard him say he's staying ready, I was like, I think we kind of nailed it here. We kind of hit the nail on the head by saying they're not going to be like hard pressed and say we need Micah Hyde anymore, because I think they're confident with what they have. But I think because of who Micah Hyde is, they would say, we'll take you back if you're ready. So if there is an injury or don't like how that depth is shaken out, or Cole Bishop isn't getting acclimated as quickly as possible, they might call Micah and say, hey, if you're ready, we're ready.
I agree with you to where I think that they feel that he's going to be the guy in any, I think they're fine at safety because they know they could call Hyde literally late August. He gets to spend another month off. Doesn't really need a training camp. Would be nice to get him in a week or two early before the season starts. But if things are struggling at safety, at least for a year, they'll call in Hyde for the last transition year. I truly believe Hyde's not playing on. He basically put all of his cards on the table and said, there's a possibility I play another year with you guys. I think the Bills do the same thing that they do with all their, some of the players that they're like, be ready. If anything happens, whether it's injury related or struggle performance related, you're getting a call. So I ultimately think that's their backup plan at safety. If
I would
they
agree,
really they really can't figure it out. I think that's a backup play at safety. Corner's a little different, but at safety, I think they know they have that in their back pocket, that come the third preseason game when things aren't looking strong, they make one phone call, dude. And I think that they accomplished their goal. But yeah, I agree with you that Micah Hyde is an interest. At first I was like, oh, that means, that's not good. That doesn't sound like there's any chance. But then as he continued to speak about it, I was like, that means he feels like I know he has a backup plan in store if something happens injury related or performance related.
Yeah. And that would make me feel a little bit more comfortable with the safety room. Like I feel good. I feel better about the safeties than I do the corners, but I still feel like there's that one missing piece just because they lost so much. And it's like, all right, how's Cole Bishop going to look? I think I'm really going to like Mike Edwards. Is Taylor Rapp going to continue how he finished towards the second half of last year? What are they going to do with that fourth, maybe fifth safety between Cam Lewis and DeMar? Are they going to be good enough for that role? If you get Micah Hyde, I think that kind of just wipes out the worry and the concern. But again, corner is the one that I keep coming back to.
Okay. Well, I want to spend the last portion of the show with your list. Bring it to us, man. I really appreciate the 400 live viewers here tonight for us. I know there's a lot of entertainment and a lot of things on. There's Olympics. There's all types of different stuff going on right now, all types of Bills talk. But I want you to give me your list. Bring us home tonight. Give us your list of what we should be looking for. And I look forward to kind of seeing how that plays out over the course of the next month.
Well, I have 5 things to watch for. So I might as well just start with the one that everyone's going to say, the wide receiver room, just because there are so many unknowns. Like we don't know who's going to be the clear-cut favorite. Now we've talked about this in and out and forward, front, like every single angle. So the one way that I will phrase it tonight, I'll just dumb it down to Chase Claypool versus Justin Shorter. Who's going to win the battle? And to our conversation earlier, I'll throw KJ Hamler in there too, because I think with Shorter, you're looking for the physical side. Is he ready? He should be 100% healthy. I think he was healthy last year and they just kind of stashed him on IR. But for what it's worth, he was listed as being injured. So is he ready physically? Is he running the correct routes? How does he look with Josh Allen? Maybe Mitch Trubisky, if they get him in with the second team. With Claypool, I think it's more of the mental game, where again, they're going to be looking to see how good of a teammate is he. Does he understand the playbook? Is he showing up on time? Is he doing things that the Bills are asking him to, like blocking and playing special teams, and maybe doing more of the dirty work instead of making that flashy high point catch, So I think that's going to be an interesting battle. And again, KJ Hamler and his speed and versatility, he could throw a wrench in those plans.
There you go. Okay. What's next?
So this one, maybe it won't be a battle because I think Connor McGovern is going to kind of lock down that center position. But I am curious to see how quickly Cedric Van Pran Granger can get accustomed to the NFL life, because I think this is a very sneaky pick. He fell to the Bills in the 5th round. This is a guy who won the national championship with Georgia. He blocked for James Cook, so they had that continuity and chemistry. And he only allowed 1 sack in college. And I don't remember what year it was, but his most recent season, 2023, 0 sacks allowed. So I don't know if this is a guy who they could just kind of redshirt him and say, be ready. If McGovern goes down, you'll be the first guy in. Because, I mean, it seems like they have good depth. I don't intend for him to play another position. So I'm not sure what the plan is for him, but I'm curious to see if there's any bit of a battle there, because I would feel pretty comfortable as long as he can get acclimated. And I just want to throw Will Clapp's name in there because I think that was another solid depth signing, because he can play guard, he can play center, savvy veteran.
There it is. Okay. Let's keep going. What's next? What's the third thing to watch out for on your list?
Well, we've been talking about it for the last half hour, but DBs. So I don't really need to go in depth there again, but I just wrote down how quickly can Cole Bishop get used to the playbook and, again, the NFL lifestyle, because who do you think, okay, we haven't really talked about it this way. Who do you think are the 2 starters week 1 against Arizona?
I think it's Taylor Rapp. I think Mike Edwards. Probably.
That's what I'm thinking.
I think
think
that's
it's
the way
Rapp
it's
and
going to
Edwards.
go.
Yeah. So Mike Edwards, free safety, Taylor Rapp strong.
Yeah, but they're interchangeable now underneath
True.
McDermott. I think we were so focused because of Poyer and Hyde, but I think now it'll kind of be two different sides of the field safeties or different positions based on how the alignment is, based on what offense they're playing. But yeah, I think right now that would be the leader in the clubhouse at the safety position.
So if and when Bishop is ready, who does
Yep.
he replace? Does he
Very-
go in for Rapp or Edwards?
I think he starts to cycle, so they play like a true 3 safety look.
Okay.
Especially if all three are healthy, I think that's what happens. Maybe plays limitedly if they all stay healthy, unless there's a performance issue. I think that you can swap out. You can really swap out either of them if there's a performance issue.
Okay, so we don't need to talk about DBs anymore because I also had written down corner 4, but we already touched on that. The next one that I had on the list here was the linebacker depth. Now, we talked about this, but the one angle that I want to take here is what's the order going to be? Because I really like what the Bills did, because they looked at what happened last year and how they had to call AJ Klein out of his RV in Key West. And it's like, oh no, actually come back to Buffalo and guard Travis Kelce.
Yep.
So it's like a stark contrast. You have a healthy Milano, healthy Bernard. I think Dorian Williams is going to take a huge leap in year 2. And then I'm just curious to see the depth chart here and how many linebackers they're going to keep, because we had written down that they're going to keep 5. I don't remember who the 6th one was that we cut, but that's going to be interesting.
We cut Spector for the practice squad, I think, originally on our list.
Yeah, and we said that he could be an IR stash, not stash, but like he gets hurt pretty frequently.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you have someone like Nicholas Morrow, who had a couple of really nice years between Chicago, Philly, he wore the green dot, he can play middle, he can play weak side, he has that vet experience. Same with Deion Jones, and I think you said last week he's really good in pass coverage, right?
Yes, and Olafosio, who's led a pretty good top-ranked defense.
Yeah, and he's going to contribute on special teams. So I'm just curious to see the back end of the linebacker room, because I hope to God that Milano and Bernard don't go down again. But if they do, who's going to be the next one to step up? And even if they don't, I mean, how many are the Bills going to keep, and what's the depth going to look like? Like, what's the pecking order going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's still to be determined who is the real leaders. I really think it could be anyone from Deion Jones being the first in, to Spector, to Dorian Williams, to Olafosio, to Morrow. Like, it's truly up for grabs right now in the linebacker room behind the starters. But there's good depth. There's good depth.
I would put Morrow as linebacker 4, pair him with Dorian, because I feel like Morrow was the Terrell Dodson replacement. And then I would have Olafosio, Spector, well, probably flip. So Spector, Olafosio, and then Deion Jones as that 7th one. But I mean, if he comes to camp hungry, he could just jut himself up and push the other guys down.
For sure. I agree with that. I think the linebacker room is a good spot to be in.
And then my final thing to watch for is the punter, because punters are people too. Because Sam Martin was a little bit shaky last year, and we were talking about this last week, and to be fair, like I really didn't know much. I was like, wait, I kind of forgot that the Bills did that. So I want to bring it up because they signed Jack Browning, a UDFA from San Diego State. And I think that there could actually be some competition there, because if Sam Martin doesn't perform, he's not consistent, this could be a new fresh leg. And the Bills had tons of special teams problems last year, whether it was Tyler Bass missing kicks, or Sam Martin shanking punts, or just the coverage in general. So along the lines of injecting some youth, they might look at someone like Browning and say, okay, he can punt, he can kick, because he kicked field goals and he kicked extra points for the Aztecs, and he has a pretty decent leg on him too. Now, it always comes down to holding too, because the Bills want to be comfortable that he can hold the balls for Tyler Bass. But I don't think that Sam Martin's a lock to make this roster. So that we should watch for that competition as well.
I agree with you. I think Browning's going to make a good push for the roster. I think what's interesting here is that Sam Martin did get his contract guarantee, but it's just not enough for me to think that he's guaranteed going to make the roster. there's definitely going to be a nice battle. I mean, a guy that can help out in all kickoffs and punts and kicks. It's going to be a guy to watch from Arizona or from San Diego State. So it's definitely going to be a guy I'm interested in seeing.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say is their stats were like pretty identical. So Browning averaged 45.4 yards per punt. He landed, you know what? No, I think it was 22. They were showing it was the field goals that I was looking at. So he was 15 to 22 from kicking field goals, but I believe that 22 was also the amount of times that he landed punts inside the 20, because Sam Martin had 24, and then Browning's longest punt was 66. Sam Martin was 70. So he was like a tick better in each category, but not by much. And Sam Martin's pretty old too, right? Like, isn't he like late 30s?
Yeah, he's been around the league for a while now. Most people don't remember, but no, I mean, I think he's mid 30s, so he's going to be exactly 34.
Okay, yeah, 34. So not as old as I was thinking.
34. I think he's born in 1990, so not quite as old. But still, even for a punter, I guess they punt till 40. So for his experience, I don't think that's necessarily an issue. But like playing him or hurt last year, and that another guy that was hurt was a tough decision for me for what the Bills did in their decision there. So definitely, I think you're right. I think it is something to watch. Jack Browning is going to be a guy that can do all three: kickoff, kick, and punt. Could be a valuable player if anything ever happens in game to have on your roster. So, I mean, at the very least, I think the Bills, especially with the new kickoff rules and the new stuff, he's going to be on the practice squad. Like at the very least, there's no reason to not use a spot on a guy that can do all three.
Especially with the new kickoff rules too.
Yeah, I think he's a lock for the practice, unless he's really comes and struggles. I think he's a lock for that practice squad as one of the 16 spots. I think because he can do everything, and you can have him ready in an emergency in any game. If on a Saturday, you can call him up if you think of anything needed for kickoffs. You can call him up without cutting somebody. So I think he'll present some value for the Bills to get through the practice squad. So I do think you'll hear his name, and that's if he doesn't win the job outright. But it's probably pretty likely that originally he'll make the practice squad. But if he's really good in his opportunities in the second half of these three preseason games, he's probably gonna get the whole second half. I think that he'll make a real chance to push for the roster.
Yeah, I think the nod still goes to Sam Martin first
at the moment. Yeah,
but don't be surprised if Jack Browning really shows up and shows out.
That's right. Well, there you have it, Kevin. Bring us home, man. Just day one. I know that there's going to be 410 live viewers. Thank you so much, guys. Can you smash the like button for us? I know there's a ton of content out there, especially as we approach the 9:30 hour Eastern Standard Time. There's a ton of shows out there, the Built in Buffalo Network, or your staple Wednesday show. But there's definitely a ton of other great content creators out there, as well as media members ripping off podcasts now coming into our space. So that's cool to see. What they can do, and they're front and center, right in front, asking the question. So they're definitely going to have their perspective. So we really appreciate you choosing to spend an hour and 15 minutes with us. But next week we're going to have a preseason game to talk about coming up soon. We're going to have a lot of days at camp to break down. We're going to have a red and blue scrimmage to break down. There's going to be a lot. This is it. This is the start, man. There's going to be a lot to really talk about, and we'll have a lot of these hypotheticals. We'll be able to break down a few more things. So what are you you gave your list, but what do you bring us home? What are you most excited for just in general, as we come on air next Wednesday at 8 p.m.?
I think I'm just the most excited to see how the offense is going to continue to gel.
Okay.
Did we mention, was it 11 touchdowns that they scored today? Is that what I heard?
We did, but yeah, I mean, yes, I believe that's what it was.
And Kincaid had 3 of them. Yes. So I'm just very intrigued with really how this offense is going to come together. So yeah, I think
I'm just so used to those years of the offense being so behind and the defense is getting sacks and dominating. Yeah. And it's not just Josh Allen. It's the offensive line's played well. It's just a really decent unit all around, and it's just going to tick on all cylinders. So I'm really excited to see it. I know we're going to see a lot of Mitchell Trubisky in the preseason. We're probably going to see some Shane Buechele in some of these games, but the red and blue scrimmage is the first. Are you going? Is that right?
I don't think I'm going, but I think it's Friday, August 2nd.
Okay. So it's the second this year. So it's, it's going to be something that is going to be pretty pretty exciting. So we'll be able to talk about that a little bit here next Wednesday. So we'll break that down. And then obviously the following Saturday, the 10th, right, is the first preseason game. So, we're going to be all eyes on that coming up soon. And maybe so then actually we could talk about that on the 7th. So in 2 weeks, we could talk about, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll bring on a Bears guest for a little bit to see if there's anything intriguing going on that we could talk about matchups. It's pretty important offseason for them too. So maybe we'll get into what the Bills side of it looks like. And it doesn't hurt to bring on a Bears guy for a few minutes in a couple of weeks. So I like to do that sometimes. So we'll see if that plays itself out. But lots of training camp in store here. The Bills will back in action for 3 straight days. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 9:45 a.m. They get a Saturday break, and then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, they'll be back in action too. Wednesday off. So they're going to be a lot of really good football and a lot of good things to talk about, because next week, next Wednesday, our show will be, there won't be practice that day, but we'll be recapping the first 6 days as we look on to the red and blue scrimmage. Blue and red scrimmage, actually. So thank you all for tuning into our show sponsors on Built in Buffalo, Monster Energy, the Summit Center, as well as Dave Dengler and Larson-Timko. Kevin, give us a final parting thought here for the viewers.
I could be wrong, but I believe I saw on Facebook today that it is John Roberts' birthday. So happy birthday, John. John is a loyal fan of going
happy
to
birthday,
Buffalo.
John.
And anyone else who's celebrating a birthday today. Go Bills.
Yeah, T's on a show tomorrow, so we look forward to seeing that as well. And to all the shows we have here on the Built in Buffalo podcast network. We have, so many good, the Founders Pod. We have, so many good shows, the Hoof. We have so many good shows across the network now and growing, looking, to grow in the audio side as well. So anybody listening to the on-demand, listening on demand, thank you so much for listening there as well in the Apple Podcast system. But thanks again to all our on-demand listeners on YouTube. Comment below, smash the like button, leave us your comments. What do you think? Is Kevin crazy for wanting a corner? Am I crazy for thinking this offensive line is as good as it's ever been? We'll see. We'll see if what comes to fruition over the next couple of weeks. But football is back, and thank you all for tuning in to our show. Be here Wednesday at 8, giving you another wild 80 minutes. And hopefully it's time to talk about actual preseason games. To me, I love preseason, so that's going to be fun as well. But from the Going Deep Buffalo Show, I'm Kevin. That's Kevin. We'll catch you here next week, 8 o'clock, to break down the first 6 practices of training camp and get into some more of our crazy and fun thoughts as training camp rolls on. And congratulations and welcome to football being back.